Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's finally happened. Microsoft got a win. Well, it's been kind of tough for them recently, right? There's just a lot of things that has not gone their way, especially when you look at their Activision Blizzard deal that most people were kind of counting out after the CMA moved to block the entire thing. But this morning, there was a pretty big approval from the EU, and they did have an interesting remedy that might even play into the CMA's ruling, and we're going to discuss all of that here today. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new here to the SpawnWave Plus channel. There is an entire PDF that the EU posted up over on their website that we have here, saying the European Commission has approved, under the EU merger regulation, the proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft. Now, the CMA did have a response to this, and I think because a lot of this is still breaking right now and kind of evolving throughout the day, we're going to cover it in Newswave tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on the main channel, so make sure you check that one out. But they found several things and decided to kind of put it in bullet point format, and even not kind enough to bold the important parts, but basically saying that Microsoft would have no incentive to refuse to distribute Activision's games to Sony, which is the leading distributor of console games worldwide. And yeah, I think at this point, most of us understand the amount of money that's involved here with Call of Duty on PlayStation is staggering amounts every single year. And even Microsoft has to look at that and say, you know, just as having it on Game Pass is a big enough benefit, we don't have to take it away from Sony. So with that in mind, yeah, they'll keep selling it and producing it on the PlayStation. And as we've seen, they also want to apparently push it out to the current Switch, but at the current pace they're going, it might just end up on the next system because, again, this could be going on for a year or two, and by then we hope that Nintendo has something else. Anyway, they say that even if Microsoft does decide to withdraw Activision games from the PlayStation, this will not significantly harm competition in the consoles market. So Sony in general has not factored into any issues when it comes to the deal potentially being blocked, or at least have some sort of opposition from regulators. The CMA confirmed this themselves, that it had nothing really to do with Sony. In fact, they are fine with the console market and Microsoft controlling Call of Duty outright, not even putting it on PlayStation. But what the EU came across is the same as the CMA, which has to do with cloud gaming. And it seems like these regulators are really looking at cloud gaming as being the de facto way to play games in the future. And it sounds weird to us right now, because if you play a game through the cloud, there's a good chance that something like Call of Duty would not be a great experience, mostly because of the quick and twitchy nature to it. You could play something like a slower RPG that's turn-based, you're just going through menus, and even some slower third-person games I think are fine. It more or less comes down to, I feel like, racing games, fighting games, and fast first-person shooters, just to name a few genres that just don't really match up the best with cloud gaming at this time. But they're thinking 20 years into the future, 30 years into the future, will we get to a point where cloud gaming has the response time down underneath, for example, your TV's and refresh rate, or your console's input? If that gets there, then yeah, I mean, at that point, a lot of people will probably opt to use the cloud to play their game. So they're thinking about that kind of future, and if we get there, they say that the acquisition would harm competition in the distribution of PC and console games via cloud game streaming services. They were also able to come to the same conclusion as the CMA when it comes to their operating system, Windows, in that Call of Duty may just function better on Windows because Microsoft wants it to be there, and they won't even offer it on something like Mac OS, Linux, right? So they want to keep that in mind, and that was seemingly part of some of the remedies that they were coming up with. But the big focus was indeed on cloud gaming. Activision's games exclusive to its own cloud game streaming service, Game Pass Ultimate, and withheld them from rival cloud game streaming providers. It would reduce competition in the distribution of games via cloud game streaming. So what did they come up with? Kind of interesting. They say a free license to consumers in the EEA that would allow them to stream via any cloud game streaming services of their choice, all current and future Activision Blizzard PC and console games for which they have a license, a corresponding free license to cloud game streaming service providers to allow EEA-based gamers to stream any Activision Blizzard's PC and console games. EA, mostly as this is the European Commission, basically in Europe. And it seems like Microsoft agreed to a free license for the EA and really any company, I guess, when it comes to cloud game streaming services. And it feels like at this point, as you can see here, because they drew up a nice little diagram with what looks like a knockoff version of Mario being played in the background. It may be Flappy Bird, I don't know, but they have Microsoft here, and they have no problem, as you can see, with the distribution of console games. It was all about cloud, and the remedies being shown here in this little flow chart showcases that, yeah, it's Microsoft's basically going to open the door for their cloud gaming distribution and streaming for seemingly, I guess, any of these platforms that want to be able to stream it. Now, I'm still curious when it comes to other money that's exchanged when it comes to getting these different games on the platforms, but those are things we'll probably never hear about because they'll be behind closed doors. But the biggest part of this is that, hey, Microsoft has an approval from a major regulatory body in the EU. The CMA moved to block it. Microsoft has appealed, and it seems like the EU will be, I guess, really an example that Microsoft can use during their appeals process, trying to get the CMA to kind of reverse their decision or revisit it and maybe come to the table with a remedy like this, with a free license and all these sorts of things around cloud gaming, which still seems to be the primary focus. Nothing with consoles or really Sony, which is kind of funny because Sony did put up a pretty big opposition and front with some incredible quotes from Jim Ryan apparently in the courtroom, but all about cloud gaming. So unfortunately, this of course gets out of most of our wheelhouses when it comes to procedure. What could happen, say, if the EU approves, but then the CMA kind of holds their ground and says, no, it's blocked. And then the FTC either approves or blocks. How can Microsoft sort of navigate a lot of this? Because some have mentioned that they can basically section off the UK with the CMA when it comes to their Game Pass offerings or any. I mean, they keep saying the UK and CMA, they're closed for business, whereas now they're saying the EU is open for business. And that probably doesn't look great to the government, I assume, in the UK when the CMA is blocking this kind of stuff, when it would just, I mean, you figure, help them when it comes to their economic growth and all of this, to have a major company like Microsoft open for business there. So again, I'm very curious how this shakes out, because having this approval seems like a pretty big thing Microsoft can point to in the coming months. I hope this isn't the coming years. I was really hoping we'd have this thing done by June. I mean, at the latest, hopefully by the fall or holiday this year. But it's possible it could go on for another 1 to 2 years, and we may be talking about this again in 2024. So here's hoping this is enough to get things really pushing in one direction or the other. Seems like now things have flipped for Microsoft, and maybe this is what they needed to get things moving in their direction, because just a week or two ago, we all kind of looked at this and said, well, it seems like Microsoft may be it may be better or in their interest to kind of move on from this deal and find other things to invest in. But now I feel like Microsoft is more gung-ho than ever to get this thing done with this approval. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Microsoft getting some good news, a big win in their bid to purchase Activision Blizzard. But what do you think is going to happen when the FTC makes their announcement? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.